lot of you don't know me, I think, and that's probably because over the last 13 years or 14 years that we've attended this church, I didn't want you to know me, and that's my fault and probably a confession. So I spend a lot of time, my wife and I, we help out with the youth group now, which is new for us. And the subject of faith has come up a lot in the last couple of weeks and months, and by design, I'm sure. And it's interesting, maybe it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, Joel and I were talking, and he said that he, something about appreciating my honesty or found it refreshing or something, and I thought that was kind of funny. The last 7 years of my life, I've spent as part of a sales team where I work at a German company, and you wouldn't associate salespeople with being honest too much, but I was actually, and people really seem to appreciate that. And so, being honest, again, I guess, and faith being the theme, I've spent the last, I'd say almost 20 years not having any faith at all. Completely lost all of it, nearly. I didn't fall so far away that I thought there wasn't a God or that Jesus didn't die on the cross for my sins or anything like that. I grew up in a Baptist church, more or less, mainly because my parents, they weren't saved, but they thought it was a great way to get rid of me. I was a pretty hyper kid. And if they could get rid of me for a couple hours a week, that was, I'm sure some kind of vacation for them. But it was a little church in a little town called Moweaqua, Illinois. I wasn't born there. I was actually born in California. But little church, and I'm sure I don't remember much about the church other than it sat in this gigantic grove, I don't know, walnut grove or something, and it looked like something you'd see on a postcard. It actually looks a lot like the church that Joel's dad preaches at. He showed me some pictures, and I thought, wow, that's where I went to church when I was a kid, except for it was in Illinois. But anyway, but I didn't get saved then. I wasn't saved at a young age like my wife was, or like a lot of you were, I'm sure. It wasn't until high school that I became saved, and then I wasn't even sure then, to be honest with you, because it was a charismatic church, and they waved at the screens and spoke in tongues, and I think half of it was Spanish most of the time. I didn't know what was going on, to be honest with you, and it wasn't what I grew up with, but I did know at the time that it was better than the life I was being presented with my father. He was a pretty hardcore drug addict and alcoholic, and there was just some sort of safety there, I guess, and some friends in the neighborhood were looking out for me. And then I moved up to Alaska, and I met my future wife and her brother, and we became really good friends, and went to summer camp before private Christian school there, and accepted Jesus again, which we all know is not really possible, right? But anyway, just had to be sure. I wasn't real confident that it was the right Jesus and the right God, which now I know is pretty ridiculous. But anyway, baptized then, and to be honest with you, it's funny. There's a picture of me in our high school yearbook, and I'm sitting there with a flyer. It's a big brochure, and it was missionary. It was missions. That's what the flyer was about. It was some summer program, and I thought that was what I was going to do and what I was being called to do, and I completely ignored it, to be honest with you guys. I missed the boat, so to speak, and so, kind of did my own thing. Wasn't really, I guess at the time on board with what God wanted for my life, and I thought I was supposed to join the military and get married young, so I did that against everyone's advice. And then things started to go really wrong. And, I've sat through a lot of sermons over the last 20, 30 years now of people who say, people who say a lot of things, but mostly that in regards to faith, when the chips were down, or when something wasn't going quite right in their life, or when all odds were stacked against them, that they felt God, or they felt some sort of peace in their life. And I'll tell you, I never felt that, and I don't think that was God's fault or Jesus or anyone else. That was on me, because I always thought that what I had planned was better. It's interesting. I took a couple of years ago. Had to take a personality test at work, and it said a lot of things, but at the very end it said, "You like to make plans for no reason." And my wife and kids will tell you that I have 3, 4, 5 plans, and I never do a single one of them. They never turn. It doesn't matter. I have a plan for if it rains tomorrow. It does, but it doesn't matter, and I won't go through with it. I just have plans. And so anyway, faith. I used to look at people who had a lot of success in their life, and now I've moved on from sales in my career to I'm a business analyst. And so I look at a lot of numbers and statistics, and I pull reports all day, and I could tell you how many ocean containers our company has on the water at any given time. And so I always found it mathematically impossible for me to have the amount of bad luck in my life that I have. It just doesn't make any sense. And our daughter was born. First we had a son, and perfect child. We couldn't have asked for more out of a kid. I mean, I just remember when he was 6 months old, wouldn't cry. A year old, playing by himself. He didn't want any attention. He was content. He would have made the perfect only child. And then our daughter's born. And some of you know the story, and whoever follows my wife on Facebook, I'm sure has seen the thousands of posts she's made over the last 3 or 4 years. But our daughter didn't turn out so well. I don't know if you're born with these types of things or chemical imbalances in your brain, but about age 10, she was diagnosed with a pretty serious mental illness, and it was actually really rare at the time for children to be diagnosed that young. And since the time she was 6, 7 months old, we knew something wasn't right. She wouldn't stop crying. They said it was colic. They said it was, you can't even imagine what we went through. And then our youngest son came along, and he's born with birth defects, and he's in the hospital for weeks at a time with surgery after surgery. And as a young Christian, I was still a fairly young Christian, 20, 21 years old, and I had started out really, being married and everything, really on fire for Jesus. So we were at a small Baptist church in Sumter, South Carolina, involved in the youth. We were going full steam. Children were being led to Christ. We were doing Awanas. It was amazing. And then when things started to go wrong, and they started to go really wrong, I felt like I was being picked on, and it just was one thing after another after another. And when you study things like statistics, you'll see that there's kind of like this running joke that there's 2% of the population where nothing can go wrong for them, but you have the other 96% of the population where it's kind of a flip of a coin. 50% of the things they try will work, and 50% of the things they try won't work. And then you have to have the other 2% of the population where they have really bad luck, or whatever you want to call it. And I was starting to feel like that was me. And so somewhere along the way, I started, I shared at the men's breakfast a couple of weeks ago that it's interesting how something like hate or anger, it just starts as a little seed or a little doubt in your heart or in the back of your mind, something just nibbling, and some people say it's, Satan, and some people say, oh, the crazy people think they're demons whispering in your ears or whatever. And it's just as simple as sin, whatever you want to call it. And I was being gnawed at and eaten alive from the inside, and I didn't even realize it. And then my wife starts to ask me why I'm so negative, and everybody I work with, why are you so pessimistic? You're the most negative person I know. And I keep swearing up and down, no, I'm realistic, you don't understand. This is reality to me, and it was. But, it wasn't looking at it through the eyes of faith, I would say. And so something happened. It was just a couple of months ago. I'll always challenge anyone, you can have all the faith in the world when everything goes your way. And that's just never been the case for me. And so, the economic downturn, collapse of the economy, whatever you want to call it, the Great Recession comes along, and your wife is at the gym and she's lifting weights and she feels a little ting in her neck or a tinge, and the next morning she wakes up and she can't get out of bed, and 2 surgeries later she's out of work for 3 years, goes by, and you're paying rent to your landlord on time every month, and guess what? They're not paying their mortgage. And so you get a slip on the door that says you're the one evicted. Whoa, wait a minute, how does that even happen? How's that possible? We just lost our pool and our 2-story house, and my wife's out of work, and I haven't had a pay raise in 3 years because the company thought this would be a great time to freeze everyone's pay. And so, and that anger and that hatred and that just complete distrust of your own Christianity and your own, and it's not anything like Job went through with kids dying and wives dying and sheep dying. It's nothing that dramatic, and it doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as your daughter starting to go to school and saying that you abuse her and you don't. And then you find CPS so involved in your life that you feel like you can't breathe, and it doesn't matter that your boys told them that you didn't hurt her, and it doesn't matter that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It won't, when you're in the system, you're in the system. And, and your wife still isn't working, and you don't even know why you're going to church, so you stop. And before you know it, you haven't been a regular attendee at church for almost 10 years. And all of these things, I'm not telling them in chronological order for a reason. Not because I can't get my thoughts straight, but because we could go on forever. But, at the end of the day, and I shared this just briefly, and kind of to get back on track with faith at men's breakfast, I just briefly mentioned this, but I watched my wife, the offering plate went by, and this is probably almost 2 months ago now. The offering plate goes by, and she drops a $20 bill in, and can you believe that I got mad? I was mad. Why? Why? Not that we weren't hurting for the money. We weren't going to starve that night if she put $20 in the offering plate, but I just shook my head and I was seeing red, and it was so irrational and so over the top, almost crazy. And I didn't even tell her about it. She had no idea I was mad about it. I keep things inside pretty well. And so the offering plate goes by, and you've heard all these stories about, I needed to pay my rent or my car broke down, and, somebody walked by and handed me a check for $500 it was a miracle, this, miracle that, and half the time I think pastors make some of these stories up because I've never witnessed or seen anything like that. And you have to remember, I've completely lost my faith. 99% of it anyway. And so it's all, it just, none of it makes sense. And then you might start to get the picture. This isn't a real story about my faith, but it's more a story about my wife's faith. She hadn't worked in 3 years, and she'd gone on interviews for almost 6 months, and resumes were out there. And just a couple of nights before she put that money in the offering plate, we were talking about how she was going to become a full-time student because the job market looked so bad. And I had gone for a couple of promotions at work and had been passed over for one reason or another. And so things weren't looking so good there, and I was in line for another promotion and trying really hard, to put all that together. And I think it was the Monday or the Tuesday, she could tell you probably, after that $20 bill was dropped in the offering plate, she gets a phone call, "Hey, we need you for an interview." And she told me, and you know what I said? I said, "Why bother? I mean, how much faith is that? Why bother? I'm so sick of driving you to these interviews and nothing happens." We only have one car. And so she said, "Well, let's just try it. And if this one doesn't work out, I'll just do school full time." And so I said, "Okay." So she gets the job, of course. And was it the $20? Well, I don't know at this point. I'm still pretty skeptical, and my faith went from 99% faithless. Let's say I gained a 1%. So I'm now at 98% faithless. And then a couple of days later, "Oh, hey, you got that promotion. Congratulations, you're not in sales anymore. You're a business analyst." "Okay, and that's going to come with a really nice pay raise." "Okay, all right." So now I'm stubborn, and I don't like to admit that I'm wrong. And so now I'm 90% faithless, maybe 85%, I don't know. It takes a lot to move me anymore. And, and that wasn't all. The IRS was coming after us for, I've never heard of anybody making too much money. But apparently they thought that if my wife lost her job and we went down to one salary, we somehow owed more money. I don't know how that works. I really don't. And so our tax returns are being questioned. And, we filed our taxes and way back when, before they were, I think maybe I filed right on April 15th. And with my son in college and stuff, we were supposed to get, I don't know, $5,000 back or something, right? And they were holding it because they had questions about some past tax returns. And we're going through all of this with the IRS. And that same week, we found out they owed us another $1,000 off a tax return I did wrong. That was actually in our favor, right? We haven't seen any of that yet, but I'm starting to have faith now. And so now I'm cruising along at 50%. Or whatever it is, my faith is now kind of, you can almost flip a coin on it. And it's, I don't know. I've seen some pretty, well, I shouldn't say that. I've heard some really interesting stories about people and having things happen to them regarding faith. And it wasn't mine that any of this happened, and so, but I'm getting there, I think, and luckily I have a wife who's never given up on it, and so that's pretty much it. I don't. We'll see what happens the rest of the year, and we'll go from there. But I'm really trying, I think, to see things differently. And Joel this morning, when he was talking to the youth, he was trying to hit a point, and I think I heard him say it before. I've definitely heard this because I'm a sports fan. But and I mentioned it. It's really easy to have faith when things are going right or when you don't have anything to lose. And Joel made a point. He said, What good, do you really have faith if you ask God for something and then when it doesn't happen, you're like, figures, like, oh, okay. And that's kind of where I was at because we needed things to happen. I prayed and it was one thing after another. I didn't get the answer I wanted or it didn't come when I wanted. And it was just like, with me, it was, well, that figures, that's just my luck. I'm that 2%. I think there was a comic book strip when I was a kid, The Born Loser, and I was starting to feel that way, and which is sad because I'm really hyper competitive, and this, I think what Joel was hitting home with the kids this morning was, you have to have skin in the game, and you have to have something to lose for faith to really mean something, and what are you willing to put in to it, reap what you sow and all that jazz. So I'm trying. We'll see. That's about it. Thank you.